Do your employees have the option to telecommute for work? A 2019 Buffer survey reported that 99% of those interviewed wanted to have the opportunity to telecommute occasionally for work. This makes sense given that telecommuting provides workers with more flexibility and a better work-life balance. Previously, telecommuting was seen as a perk to extend only to some employees. But in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's clear that telecommuting is necessary for business continuity. Today, we will be going through the steps of how to create a telecommuting policy that works for both your organization and employees. I'm Noel with Jotform. Let's go. Whether you're trying to create a permanent telecommuting program or temporarily as an emergency option, you still need to have an official telecommuting policy in place. Having a set of guidelines for telecommuting can help your organization to avoid the pitfalls of remote work and create the right conditions for continued productivity. Drafting a telecommuting policy can be broken down in 3 basic steps. First, set the goals and context for your telecommuting policy. Then consult legal counsel and any relevant stakeholders. And finally, draft your policy. Before you draft your policy, you need to consider your goals for doing so. Ask yourself, why do you need this telecommuting policy? Do you want one just in case for business continuity reasons? Or are you making it an option for employees during regular business operations? Figure out what you're hoping to achieve by offering telecommuting. Do you want to attract new talent, reduce costs, or maybe improve employee job satisfaction? However you answer these questions should help you shape your policy and define its terms. You can also look at some example policies from companies that you respect. While every policy should be unique to address its specific needs, you can still get some ideas with regards to the scope and procedures you find relevant to your organization. Next, you'll need to consult legal counsel and any relevant stakeholders. Telecommuting may have compliance implications depending on your business and location. This is why you should consult with your legal department before putting any policy into place. You can face potential compliance issues with liability and workers' compensation for off-site workers, as well as wage and timekeeping standards. You can also face compliance issues within the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, as well as privacy and confidentiality standards for sensitive data. Then, make sure that you consult your managers as well as the HR and finance departments in the process. Having their input will ensure that there won't be any holes in your policy. And finally, it's time to draft your policy. In order to create an effective telecommuting policy, you'll need to touch on certain basic concepts. We've compiled some of the most important areas that you should cover, along with questions you should seek to answer when you draft your policy. First, you need to establish your eligibility and approval process. This will define who's able to work remotely, when, how often, and how employees can gain approval for doing so. You'll need to consider several factors. Take a look at their positions or job titles and see which roles might be better suited for telecommuting. Then look at individual employees. Should the ability to telecommute be earned by meeting certain individual criteria, like performance metrics or length of time at the company? And can team members potentially lose the option to telecommute by falling below these standards? And be sure to look at the circumstances. Maybe you only want to give the option to telecommute during certain times or because of external circumstances. This can include societal factors like the pandemic or individual circumstances. You can also include other approved reasons like travel or life events. Next, figure out how you will track time and availability. Lay out clear guidelines regarding when you expect workers to be available. Do you want employees to work during certain office hours, or can they work at any time they choose? Figure out if they need to be available for certain meetings, and consider which meetings should be held in person rather than remotely. And for your non-salaried employees, make sure that they accurately record all of their hours worked in an approved time tracking system. Then, be sure to set your communication guidelines. For these guidelines, you'll have to answer 2 major questions. What modes of communication will be used, and what level of responsiveness do you expect? Figure out which channels you want your employees to use to communicate with the rest of the team. You can use messaging apps like Slack, or you can utilize video and phone calls. However you choose to communicate, make sure it's consistent for all team members. Then define how quickly you expect employees to respond to messages from managers or the rest of the team. While employees should have some guidelines surrounding responsiveness for the sake of team productivity, you should still give telecommuters the space they need to do their work without constant interruption. You'll also need to set some productivity standards. This will ensure that telecommuters are getting their work done efficiently. Make it clear what they need to achieve in a given time frame. The standards that you put in place will vary by role, but you don't need to be overly specific in the policy document. Instead, focus on setting clear and transparent benchmarks on what your employees need to accomplish and how exactly you will measure their productivity. This will either be something for each manager to decide for their team, but for smaller organizations, this can be a company-wide decision. Telecommuters need to have the correct tools in their homes in order for them to do their jobs. You'll need to provide them with the proper equipment and supplies. In your policy, outline the equipment and tools that your workers should be using, including software and apps, hardware, and other physical items. Then decide which of these items your organization will purchase for your employees and which you will reimburse employees for purchasing. Think about whether your telecommuter's home office or workspace should meet certain standards. This can include things like physical safety and security guidelines, which will protect your employee from risk of injury and protect company equipment and data. Whatever standards you need to meet in the office also need to be met for telecommuters. Next, cover your security protocols. Employees working off-site can be vulnerable to security risks without the protections typically included in the office environment. For instance, if your telecommuters are using unsecured networks, they could be exposing sensitive company data to potential hackers. Be sure to consult with your IT department to define your cybersecurity standards and provide your employees with all necessary security software. And lastly, consider your guidelines for professionalism. While in an office setting, the appearance of your employees matters. But for your employees working from home, the standards can be a bit looser. Keep in mind that the same level of professionalism that you would expect from team members meeting face-to-face should still apply for virtual interactions like video meetings. Let's review. When it comes to drafting a telecommuting policy, there are 3 basic steps. First, set the goals and context for your telecommuting policy. Then consult legal counsel and any relevant stakeholders. And finally, draft your policy. While drafting your policy, be sure to cover topics like eligibility and approval, time tracking and availability, communication guidelines, productivity standards, equipment, security, and professionalism. And remember, as your organization learns and grows, you can refine and adapt your telecommuting policy. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Noel with Jotform. We'll see you next time.